Here we are again to talk aviation. Another 2 weeks goes zoom by. We're almost at the end of February. And you've got Paul Brennan here in Wellington. And Martin, where are you today?
Sampling the bucolic beauties of Palmerston North. And it's a really busy little town. There's a lot happening here.
Not to mention it is the home, the heart of NAC. I mean, that's where it all started, Palmerston North.
Yeah.
Who'd have thought? Okay, so let's get into our subject. So much to talk about. First thing that I must mention, Martin, you know how I was having a little hissy fit about these captioning pictures in New Zealand newspapers, anything to do with airlines. They'd just throw up the first picture they could find, and I thought the right flyer would just be the one for everything. If you're just going to have a picture, have that one. Well,
generic.
It happened again, a story in the Herald over a woman who had her specialist food mucked up on a flight from New Zealand through to London, and it ended up costing her $5,000. Anyway, the story was put up, and with the caption, they put one of those old 737-300s. As if to suggest that this woman would fly all the way to London in this aircraft. Of course, the airline doesn't operate the aircraft anymore. That happened back September last year. They retired it, and it was the old livery. And I put a little post up on my Facebook page, and hey presto, you look at the story this morning, caption picture is now the all-black 7879 staring you right in the face. But here's the thing, they don't fly that to London, right?
Exactly. It still doesn't go to London, but at least it's the right era.
So I like to think I might have had something to do with that. I doubt it, because it was such an obvious, wrong caption. Surely someone would have pointed it out. But there you go. At least that's progress of some kind,
Citizen activism.
That's what it is.
That's what it is.
Okay, we were talking about the Emirates service coming up, the direct flight from Auckland to Dubai. It starts on the 1st of March, right, Martin?
Yep, apparently.
Real close. And we got an email from EK777 driver. He gave us some very good information about this flight, and I thought maybe we'd share it with the listeners. What do you reckon?
Absolutely.
As an avid listener, thank you, to your YouTube channel, I thought I'd pass on a bit of info regarding the upcoming EK DXB to AKL 777-200 LR service. The first flight from Dubai will be crewed by 2 Kiwi captains, a Kiwi first officer and an Emirati. Is that how you say it? Emirati first officer?
Emirati, yeah.
The inaugural Auckland to Dubai sector will be crewed by an Emirati and Kiwi captain, also a Kiwi and Aussie first officer. And he says the 200 LR in Emirates service is a very capable beast. It will be able to lift out of Auckland a full load of passengers, a freight load of about 16 tons. Wow. And enough fuel to stay airborne for about 18 and a half hours. The crew per sector will consist of 4 pilots, 14 cabin crew looking after an aircraft configuration containing 8 first-class seats, 42 business-class seats, and 216 economy-class seats. And he says, I hope this gives a bit more of a Kiwi angle to the upcoming inaugural flights. Well, thank you. Certainly does. Fascinating information.
That is. It's very nice. So that's 266 people for 18 hours. That's pretty amazing. Plus 16 tons of stuff.
That's what gets me. Not only that, you've got 16 tons. I mean, that's a lot of weight. That's a couple of truckloads of, stuff.
Yeah, eggs.
Flowers, probably.
It won't be mutton anymore or sheep because that's all being done in Saudi because they found the perfect conditions.
Oh, yeah, they've got that model desert sheep farm going.
Yeah.
Which is proving, they're knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, no, it's going
with
well.
That one. They actually had a sheep survive, I've heard, so that's real progress.
Yeah.
And if anyone would like to send in comments, we should be a little more proactive about this, but hey, we have busy lives, right? So sometimes we barely have time to make this podcast, but send it to...
Or we're just really forgetful.
Sorry, who are you again? And what is the address? It's airside-media@gmail.com, isn't it?
That's it.
All right, there you go. All right, we've been talking C-Series all the way through. Interesting development there, and Boeing now in the picture. What's happening?
So C-Series, as we know, has been battling. It seems to be the right plane, wrong time. All sorts of things going on there. It's being undercut by the competition. Embraer is doing very well. The Superjet, the Sukhoi Superjet, is going surprisingly well. So C-Series, Bombardier needed a few runs on the board. Looks like they got them. Air Canada, surprise, surprise, came in and ordered 75 plus further options for 30. So It's looking like 100 aircraft.
Big order.
Yes. Now, one of the orders that Bombardier had been hoping for was United. And the very day after Air Canada announced their order, United announced that they'd ordered a whole lot of 737 MAXs from Boeing. Now, the interesting thing about this order is that it's for the 7 MAX, the smallest version of the Boeing 737 range. And interestingly enough, this was a plane many people had thought Boeing was going to try not to build because it only received orders for just over 50. There was a lot of talk that that wasn't an economical number to build for a specific model, subtype. But no, United's taking them. Boeing's committed to the 737 MAX line. And the interesting thing about this is the price. It looks like Boeing has given them to United for around $20 million each.
Crikey, that's a classic blocking move, isn't it?
That's an 80-something% discount, apparently.
Questions of commercial ethics and fairness start to come into it, don't they? That's sort of predatory pricing, wouldn't you say, at that level of discount?
Well, this is the thing, and this is why they're always very careful to say it's a discount off the list book price. It's not to say they're not making money at $20 million. Now, if you could prove that they weren't making money, you might have a case that it's price dumping or something like this. But they're probably still making money. The actual airframe's 50 years old.
Well, that reveals then the level of profit involved in one of these potentially, which could be a lot more than people think. But they know that there's no way you're going to recover that differential in price. What does the C Series go for? Obviously more expensive than $20 million a copy. It's just the price of staying in the game, isn't it? You sacrifice X amount of these 7 versions. I wonder if they sort of regret cancelling out that 600 length now.
No, I doubt it. I just think they want to have a foot in the door. They will price it so that although it's less efficient than the C Series, it'll always be a viable proposition, especially to a large current operator. That's the last thing Boeing wanted, was United to take on a new type, especially when the C Series, if it goes well, will be expanded.
Yes, it can go to 160, can't it?
Exactly, and that's really where Boeing... No.
They should just buy it.
Well...
Then they're in the right phase of the product
development,
timing and development. It's a huge leap up. Having to develop a whole new plane, it's years.
It is years. And apparently this new development, which is, we constantly hear about, the middle of market plane, the MOM, that everyone's begging Boeing, it'll come in as a sort of upper 737, 757 replacement, new technology and blah, blah, blah. Apparently Boeing's finding it very, very hard to commit for precisely that reason. It's going to take a long, long time and going to cost a whole bunch of money. And who's to say that Airbus halfway through won't announce the A322 or the A323 or whatever and trump them?
Well, that's the danger. It just sounds like they're just sort of clinging on, but not really making any expansive or no sign of any expansive move, which is what you need to keep moving forward, isn't it?
Yes, but I think they got a bit of a fright after the 787, and understandably. I think most people would have got a fright over that.
Yeah. All right, and I see at the same time, Mobile, Alabama has just rolled out, the Airbus plant there, their first A321. It's going to be for JetBlue. That's interesting. That's something that Airbus are doing again, differently from Boeing. They've got these manufacturing centres. Now you can't say that the A320 line is a European product. It's an American product, absolutely, fundamentally.
And Chinese.
And Chinese.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated as to where that will go, you know.
Yep. I mean, McDonnell Douglas, back in the day, they saw the writing on the wall, and that's why they tried to assemble MDs over in China.
Yeah, in fact, I think all the Chinese orders were assembled in China.
They were put together, but they had great plans for that, and it didn't quite work out, but it was a good idea at the time.
Their attempt at a regional jet really looks like that aircraft still. Did they get the tooling or something?
They kept the tooling.
Yeah. All right.
More Airbus news. The initial figures are in from Lufthansa on the A320neo.
Right.
And apparently it's exceeding all design specs.
Wow.
Yes, and I was reading in one of the German papers that the people under the flight path at Frankfurt say that the perceived noise, it's less than half of a previous Airbus.
I'm going to put up a bit of video on our YouTube version that I came across the last few days of the delivery flight of that aircraft from inside the cabin looking out over the wing in that engine. And on takeoff, you can hardly hear it. In fact, the comments in the comment section is like, what does the engine sound like? You know?
Yes.
It's just not there. It's just this sort of whispery sort of noise.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And even outside, they say it's eerily quiet.
Yeah. So that looks like it's lining up, you know, all going well, and we're in the initial phase there, lining up as possibly a real winner again. I mean, we sound like Airbus fanboys, but, you know, they are the ones doing it. But Airbus again, I see Airbus are upping the production rate of the A330 to 8 a month. You know, it's surging. They've got so many orders, they've got to up their production rate on that.
It's interesting, hey, for an old plane.
For an old plane. So, yeah, they must be doing something right. Oh, yes, and have you seen I think there's a graphic doing the rounds, the picture of the 7378 freight conversion with the cargo door. That looks pretty cool.
That'll be good for them.
Yeah, well, it's long, isn't it? So I think you can get about 11 or 12 containers on the thing, and I think it lifts about 50,000 or 52,000 pounds of weight. And there'll be plenty of them coming off, the early ones coming off passenger flying now.
Yeah.
I mean, all those Ryanair ones, hundreds of them, they'll all come out in the next few years, probably become little freighters, eh?
Well, Boeing's hoping so, but yeah, remains to be seen, I suppose.
Let's have another look at this runway extension idea, Martin. The debate continues. The New Zealand Institute for Economic Research has released analysis stating that the 350-metre runway extension plan for Wellington International Airport is highly speculative and should not proceed. Well, the airport company have come back and said, well, they're wrong. I see they're valuing each extra tourist into the area at only just $160 economic benefit. That's ridiculous. They spend more than that.
Who's valuing that?
That's
the airport or the others?
That is the others. That is the NZIER's estimate. Each additional tourist would add just $160 of economic benefit. That just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
No, because that's basically a taxi ride to the city and a taxi ride back from the city. That's $160.
You know, when the cruise ships come in, they're all waving their credit cards. Millions of dollars change hands. Every day at that scale. Now, the NZIER looked at routes to Middle East, Asia and the West Coast. They're saying basically that demand isn't there, and then even if you bought them in, they're not worth that much. Now, here's the thing. The Board of Airline Representatives, and I think Air New Zealand's part of that, released the NZIER analysis as the main element of its submission, that the 350-metre extension to its existing 1945-metre runway is highly speculative and should not proceed. So, all right. So you can see what's ranging up here. Everyone knows, surely, that with airports, I've said it before, you build it and they will come. The fuel prices are good. New Zealand's a safe destination. The tourist numbers are trending up. Wellington tourism, or this area tourism's been going well. You've got the aircraft that make all this happen now, A350s, A330s, the list goes on. No one in their right mind would stand still, right?
Right, but you've got to see, I think, Air New Zealand's point of view. Air New Zealand does not want to operate a third major international gateway in New Zealand. They just can't be bothered.
It's more than that for them, because these are outside airlines marketing to their own markets, which Air New Zealand is not even involved in, growing traffic.
Yeah, it's a competition gateway for New Zealand, and Air New Zealand really, quite rightly, doesn't want that. But their nightmare scenario is another airline coming in, making Wellington its gateway to New Zealand, and then offering flights to Europe or wherever via a destination Air New Zealand doesn't want to serve.
Like AirAsia X, for example?
Or let's say Vietnam Airlines, off the top of my head.
Or
Vietnam
Philippines.
Airlines say, or the Philippines, we're going to do Wellington, London via wherever.
Yeah, or to anywhere on our network.
Yes.
And it could be actually one stop.
Yes.
I mean, the Philippines are flying into Auckland with, A320s? All the way down from Manila, through Australia, albeit. But not to get fixated on that particular airline, but it's a good example. They fly to quite a few international destinations, which are all direct flight out of Manila. Effectively, could be one stop.
Or Fiji. You want to go to the West Coast? Fiji start offering regular big planes out of Wellington.
I'd be thinking about that if I was Fiji Air, for sure.
And Air New Zealand's automatically got a pretty scary competitor on their doorstep. So Air New Zealand doesn't want it to happen because they don't want to have to go there. But if it happens, they're going to go large.
Because they could take you to LA.
Yes.
Fiji Air, quite easily. Yeah.
Yep.
I think, though, surely for the people of the region, who want the city or the region to prosper and do well, you really have to have this bit of infrastructure to plug into those opportunities.
But
and to be held back is ridiculous.
It's not about the people, Paul. It's about the shareholders of Air New Zealand, and that'd be the government to a large extent.
Well, we'll be looking then on the lookout for any unreasonable manipulation of the situation from government direction. I wonder if anyone else will pick up this NZIER report and try and, use it to argue it down. It's a convenient piece of research to have, isn't it?
Well, you see what the government as the shareholder says.
All right, well, say no more. Qantas have made a huge profit, Martin. It wasn't long ago that we were sort of saying they were in the crap, but now, over $1 billion?
Yeah, well,
Man,
yeah.
how do they do that?
Cheap fuel, hey? What a difference a day makes.
The airline group said its fuel bill for the last half year was down $444 million compared to the prior corresponding period.
It's just
Stunning, isn't it?
It is stunning, and you're hearing stories now that the fees to get through the Suez Canal are so expensive. Well, fuel's got so cheap. It's actually cheaper to sail around Africa than to go through the Suez Canal, and they're doing it.
Right.
And you just think, when an airline like Emirates says, right, our fuel supply chain is now empty, we're filling it up with the cheap stuff as it comes through, right?
Right, yeah.
They start putting 650, 700 seats in A380s and start saying, right, you know what, Brisbane to London,
Yeah.
$900 return, this type of thing.
Easy.
That is going to hurt a lot of people.
Qantas expect to hire 170 new pilots over the next 3 years. They're bringing on 787-9 Dreamliners into the fleet. Alan Joyce is quoted as saying, this record, you've got to put the accent on with him, don't you, the Irish accent. This record result reflects a stronger, leaner, more agile Qantas. They got rid of a lot of jobs.
They did.
Huge amount of jobs.
Yes.
They're putting a couple of new Fokker 100s on, too, by the way, on their WA routes.
Bringing them back from WestJet.
That aircraft lives on. It's always had a place in Australia back from, F-28s all the way through.
I've flown them a few times in the States, and I thought they were magic to fly in.
Martin, I saw an article, went through the Prune website, and it was a headline called AirAsia Crash Highlights Risks of In-Flight Troubleshooting. And we are all familiar with the disappearance of the AirAsia Airbus A320. I think it was flying from Surabaya, Indonesia to Singapore. It crashed just a couple of days before the end of 2014, December 28, 162 on board. And there was talk about weather and other issues that could have played a role. But it turns out that, again, almost the banality of it is mind-blowing.
Scary, eh?
There was actually nothing wrong with the plane at all. And there was, I think, an indicator issue. But a fixation on troubleshooting without actually knowing how to troubleshoot basically killed 162 people. This is not the first time this has happened.
Yeah.
But it is calling into question now some of the aspects of training. So what did you make of that article?
It's just a shocking loss of situational control, not of the plane, but of what they were doing in the cockpit.
From every angle.
From every angle. So they're flying along, they get a rudder limiter warning light comes on. So they follow the book, they reset it. And now the rudder limiter, it's part of the autopilot or the fly-by-wire system that limits the distance the rudder can travel above certain speeds and altitudes. Because above certain speeds and above certain height, if you put too much rudder in, it'll rip the tail off the plane.
You don't want that. No.
So they're getting a light coming on saying that limiter doesn't appear to be working. It doesn't say the rudder's malfunctioning. It just says that, careful, this limiter doesn't appear to be working. So don't use the rudder.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So they reset it. And it comes on again and they reset it. And it comes on again and they reset it. And by now it sounds like they're huddled in the front, obsessing about this rudder limiter, flying over airports, still staying at the same speed, where if there is a rudder problem, it would be dangerous, and altitude. So they had a number of options. They could have checked in for a landing. They could have slowed down and descended if they were really worried. And then, sounds like because the light was irritating them at this point, they pulled the circuit breaker without realizing what other circuits were on that circuit breaker and disconnected the autopilot.
I was thinking about this the last few days, sort of trying to digest that. What condition set of circumstances come about through that interaction with technology. And I think people know from their experience with PCs or computers, home computers. I'm not a computer expert. I wouldn't know how any of that inside the guts works. If anything fundamentally went wrong with it, I could never fix it. So my disconnect with it is immediate. It's a mystery. If it's not working right, it's a mystery. But 9 times out of 10, if I turn it off and turn it on again, it works again. So that becomes the sort of the way you deal with it. Now, that's not good if you're flying in an aircraft and that system is controlling the aircraft. That is so dumb. But that could explain this obsession to turn things on and off, try and disconnect the power through them and reboot them without... Well, it's just, you're thinking of your PC at home. Well, I just turn it back on and then it seems to work all right, so...
And they know it's a fly-by-wire system. They know there's probably they're told that there's a fair amount of false positives or positive falses or whatever.
You'd hope.
And so, but the interesting thing is this plane, so it comes down to pilot error, but it also comes down to a massive maintenance issue because this error had been flagged many, many times and nothing had been done.
All right, in that particular aircraft, right?
That exact plane.
Yeah, so that shows you've really get on and do your maintenance. There's some interesting historic occurrences that are quoted in the story, which really reinforce it. Everyone is familiar with the Alaska Airlines flight MD-83 that had the screw jack strip in the stabilizer.
Yeah. When you read that, it is just so shocking. So those guys are sitting up front, flying down the coast, again, flying past dozens of airports where they could have landed.
They could have got down on the ground. That's the thing.
And yet what they're doing is they're sitting there, running the jack screw up to its upper limit, down to its lower limit, thinking that will fix it until the jack pops out of the bearing, and they've got nothing. Then they're dead. They're all dead.
Because they're stripping the thread on the screw jack.
Instead of just leaving well alone and saying, well, we could have a serious problem here, we're going to land, we won't touch it.
Yeah, just leave it right there.
Yeah.
They fiddled around and they cycled it up and down. And then, of course, everyone remembers, well, a lot of people remember that Eastern Airlines brand new TriStar that went into the Everglades in a very, very subtle descent as the crew were fixating with a undercarriage light bulb, I think had blown. And they were fixating. They disconnected the autopilot, didn't realize at night they were descending, and then that's what happened. So,
and when you read the cockpit transcript about that, it's like they were having a collegial chat.
Yes, they were so off the task in hand.
Yeah.
Talk about sweating the small stuff. I mean, it's easy to sit here and make these comments, but when you look at it in hindsight in the cold light of day, especially that Alaska Airlines thing, I mean, I've seen the program on that and read about that and thought, gosh, those poor guys, they get caught with that. And of course, there was a maintenance issue at Alaska where they weren't doing the job properly and people were sort of neglecting tasks, like you were saying with that rudder thing, not doing the proper maintenance. Yeah, but they still flew past, 2-3 airports where they could have immediately landed and probably would have been fine. Oh, dear.
The one that really interests me is that American Airlines 757 that flew into that mountain in Colombia simply because the electronic flight instrument, something had gone wrong with it, and they didn't trust the manual standby.
Yeah, so what's the point of even having it there if you don't...
They kept trusting the electronic one, even though the old gravity one was actually showing that they were inverted, and they didn't believe it.
That's incredible, isn't it?
That can't be.
Yeah, all right. Okay, so... it's just sad that so many people pay with their lives, well, number one, but for no reason. You could understand it if a meteor hit the plane or the engine blew up or something, but this? Crikey. All right, we normally do a aircraft of the week, but we got to maybe bump that to another episode because Eric Melrose Winkle Brown passed away in the last week, Martin. A legend, absolute legend.
They don't make names like that anymore, do they?
What a great name, and he looks the part too. He's got those eyebrows and that chin, and he's the man. He was.
The man. 487 aircraft types, not including subtypes.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I think he flew every single aircraft that was flown in combat in World War II. Every single type.
Yeah.
And he also had the world record for the most aircraft carrier deck landings, and he made a whole bunch of them before the end of the Second World War. So,
yeah, amazing character, very interesting and very, very professional. He was apparently one of the first people ever to put pilot notes on his legs, taped into his thigh.
And that took off, didn't it?
It did take off.
Makes perfect sense.
And he's the guy. He was putting mosquitoes onto those small Atlantic carriers.
Also big time with the Buccaneer, and he is cited as responsible pretty well for the F-4 being taken into the Royal Navy.
You think, 487 aircraft types, basically from powered hang gliders, Hercules, Victor, Comet, you name it. He flew just about everything. All the Century Series fighters that the Yanks had, all the British fighters, 50s, 60s, into the 70s. The Harrier prototype. You think that a test pilot today, a test pilot career, if they get 100 flights in, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
He had thousands.
I know. I wonder if he's one of those guys who, like Chuck Yeager, you read his autobiography, you listen to him speak, and you can tell that, you've got those sort of mechanically minded guys that sort of feel out the machine.
Yeah. He was very lucky because he straddled the very simple, let's get in and give the old kite a go,
Yeah.
to flying quite sophisticated aircraft. But I'm pretty sure that early experience was a real help in flying the modern stuff.
Yeah. He was Scottish, I see.
Yeah.
And his father was a former balloon observer and pilot in the Royal Flying Corps. He was born in 1919, by the way, so 97 when he died on the 21st of February. He spent 30 years in the service, from 1940, or 39, to 1970. I thought he went a bit longer than that, but that's what it says here.
Well, his last flight was in the 90s.
Right.
So
Okay.
he carried on.
Yeah. A guy like that would have all sorts of consultancy work and, like Frank Whittle did a lot of that, didn't he?
It's just amazing, hale and hearty, despite spending a great deal of his life in the cockpit of planes leaking very high octane and probably quite exotic fuels and solvents and all that around him. He probably smoked for the first 40 years of his life, and just, no worries.
Yeah.
Good on him.
Yeah, I love the name. Captain Eric Melrose Winkle Brown, CBE, DSC, AFC, and there's a whole lot of others as well.
A whole line.
Yeah.
I mean, he flew the 262. Apparently, he flew both versions of the 262, the tail dragger and the tricycle one.
Yeah.
He flew that Arado twin-engine bomber. Yeah, and with minimal preparation. I mean, apparently for the 262, he spoke to a prisoner.
Okay, yeah, give me a few, pointers.
Tips.
He also said that little rocket-powered thing that the Germans had was
the 263.
He wasn't very complimentary on that.
Or the 163. I think it was the 163.
That was crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was brave, and it was an early swept wing, which they didn't really know how it was going to perform. But apparently it didn't perform badly, but it was pretty much a one-way trip.
Yeah. So he passed away on the 21st of February. And that, I think, brings to an end our program for this fortnight, Martin. So happy days in Palmerston North.
Yes, I'll be back later today.
Okay. All right, I thought you were maybe there for an extended stay, but...
No.
All right, Paul Brennan in Wellington.
Martin Noakes for the moment in Palmerston North.
See you later.
Cheers.